Hey everybody, it's Jack Reed of the Future Pastimes. In this video, I'm going to be talking about spice dialing and alternative ideas that have floated up in recent years. What is spice dialing? Well, this is part of the advanced rules. Now, the advanced rules introduce a few things: extra faction advantages, a second spice blow each round, and I think primarily the biggest thing is the advanced rules for combat, which we can take a look at here in the Gale Force 9 rules. And in a nutshell, your forces are always half of their strength unless you spend spice to count them at full strength. And so you would need to spend one spice for each of your forces to count it at full strength. And those that are not will result in half dials. So you can see here we have a 2.5, and that is 5 forces, none of which are at full strength. And this would be, if you only had 5 forces, this would be a full dial of 2.5. And it's an interesting concept, and I think that the way a lot of people rationalize it is by you're paying your forces, you're giving them a paycheck in the form of spice. Although, spice just doubles as whatever the currency is. So it's used as currency, even though it technically is not currency. But anyway, and those forces that aren't paid, or they're phoning it in. They're not really, they're not fighting at full strength. Which don't scrutinize it too much because it's a little bit ridiculous. If you're out there in the desert and you got a bunch of Fremen coming at you, you're going to fight at full strength whether there's a paycheck or not, because you are going to die. You lose the battle, everybody dies, and then they're rendered for their water. So spice dialing it's not that difficult of a concept to figure out, but it gets a little bit complicated when you've got the Emperor. And the Emperor has the double strength Sardaukar, so they would only count as 1 without spice, but they can count as 2 when they're paid spice. But you could have some Sardaukar and some of your standard forces there and some spice, and you can't spend it on all of them. And this is where it gets a little bit confusing especially for new players, but even people who've been playing it for a while. They're like, I'm not sure, 100%. I think I got it, but and the half dials is clunky. And I think for me, this is the biggest issue. Is just this is kind of clunky. You don't even have a number in there. Like, was that an 8 and a 9? I think so. I guess it couldn't be a 3 and a 4 or whatever. And so, yeah, it's just not very elegant. And, of course, this is not what the original designers of Dune ever imagined. And they, in fact, not only don't use advanced combat and spice dialing, they don't really even understand it. They've been taught it, and they've used it, and then they promptly forget how to do it. And so they're not fans of it either. This was added by some designers from Avalon Hill back in the 70s. But I think one of the reasons why a lot of people said, let's figure out this so that we can use it, because they did want to use those advanced advantages. They were optional advantages. But again, however you want to characterize them, you, as a fan of the Dune game and the Dune universe, definitely want to use them. And certainly I was that way. Now, and I started learning Dune in the early 80s. We started with the basic game. Of course, it wasn't called basic. It was just the game. These are the rules. And that's what we played. And we loved it. And our friend kept saying, we've got all these optional rules, but we're going to have to figure out the combat. And every time he described it to us, the rest of us kind of gave him a blank look, and we were 11 or 12 years old at the time. Not to say that 11 or 12-year-olds can't grok this concept, but we were just like, I don't feel like it's worth it. And so we kept avoiding it. Eventually, we did start using it. It was not widely adopted. But once I got to the point where I was like, no, I definitely get this now, then I was always using it. And I always play with the advanced rules. So when the 2019 edition came out, I only play the advanced rules. And it's not because I love spice dialing. I still don't love it. I understand it and I can do it. I just love all those extra advantages. The Harkonnen gets to capture leaders, and Kwisatz Haderach for the Fremen, and a lot of crazy stuff for the Bene Gesserit, and several more advantages for the Fremen. and et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that has a pretty wide appeal. The extra advantages, the spice dialing and advanced combat, a lot of people just want to avoid it. And so I thought it would be fun and interesting to take a little stroll and look at some of these things. So we have Chuck has been thinking about advanced combat over the years. Is it needed? And et cetera, et cetera. We won't read through all of this. I'm not sure what he's talking about with to hit armor class 0. But he was talking about alternatives. So here he's talking about using normal values for basic rules, except for the Fremen and the Subvoids. We'll get to them. But basically, you're talking about forces. You can spend spice to boost their strength by 1. So they're always at full strength, but you can bump them up a little bit. And like he said, he's talking about the Subvoids and whatnot, some special exceptions, but that's the idea. No half dialing. And I think that was his biggest beef was, what are we doing with the half dialing? He mentions the doubling of leaders, and this has been another solution that has popped up many times, even in the first edition of the Avalon Hill Dune. People who didn't want to do spice dialing, they're like, let's just double the strength of the leaders and keep the forces at full strength and not have to worry about that. So that was one approach. Here we have Salman here talking about each unit has 1 strength as usual, 2 for the starred units. A player can support each one for 1 spice to double its strength. So yeah, they here again avoiding the half dials. I think that is the biggest issue. But I think what happens here is there's also some other pathways that people are worried about, and that is just buffing the Fremen. So even if you fix this, the 2019 edition anyway, the Fremen don't need spice to count at full strength. So how are you going to counter that? If everyone's always full strength, that's obviously not going to be a solution. So then you've got a series of things like, well, maybe the Fremen get 3 treachery cards instead of 1. That would be a pretty big deal. Or they can use worthless cards as cheap heroes. Or even rounds have 1 spice blow, odd have 2. So Jay Bernardo here has got a lot of stuff. And this is a thread with several replies as, people weigh in. Everyone has a very strong opinion, I think. Here's another: buffing the Fremen, give Fremen extra starting spice, free shipment to anywhere, any rock territories. The Thumper token from Dream Rules. Dream Rules is something that I think originated from the Dune tabletop Discord, or maybe that's just where it proliferates. But they have a completely different approach on many of the things in the Dune, which I'm definitely not going to go into in this video. And then the Fremen get the guild default victory instead. Of course, Toby here is just like, just play with advanced combat. But others are like, don't buff the Fremen, or yes, get rid of it. And so that was interesting here. Here again, we've got, no half increments on the battle wheel. For each whole increment, the player must either commit 2 of their forces to be lost if victorious, or commit 1 of their forces and pay 1 spice. So that is an interesting take. But there's a lot of bookkeeping afterwards, and I think it's going to have a big ripple effect on the game where you maybe are even weaker after a battle, or the wealthy factions are even stronger after a battle. So that's something I would want to see in action. Here I really don't like how advanced combat works. It seems too fiddly. So proposing that you get the spice collection, the Karama cards, advanced game faction rules. Leaving that out. Leaving out the double spice. So using basic, but keeping the things. But again, you get to that point of, well, what about the Fremen? And that's the biggest issue. Leave out the Fremen. That was my 2 cents on that one. But can you really leave out the Fremen in the game of Dune? I feel like they should almost always be in the game. I would like advanced combat without spice for battle. It appears to be a nerf to the Fremen. So I thought about how to compensate for this. Any Fremen any battle that they're in, the Fremen are considered the aggressor and win any ties. Is that enough of a buff? I don't think it would be. But here we've got Ben. I would like to play advanced combat without. I want this also. Teaching players. Yeah, I mean, I've had the same phenomenon. I'm always teaching Dune to new players, and they've got the faction sheets on there, and they're looking ahead as I'm going over all the rules, and they're like, "What is all this about advanced advantages?" And there's a lot of cool stuff on here, and I was like, "Well, let me describe to you how the battle system works." And it is a breaking point. There's, I think, a majority of the new people that I'm teaching it to, they go, "Oh, how has this lasted since 1979? This seems like a really archaic and terrible battle system." Whereas if I just describe the basic battle system, which I can do fairly quickly, they can definitely wrap their head around the idea of you're essentially dialing the number of forces you're willing to risk, you're willing to sacrifice in order to win a battle. Well, I've got 8 forces in here. Well, I'm willing to sacrifice 7 of them so I can add 7. That's a very straightforward concept. Now, and it's very elegant. It's a great battle system. It may be the best battle system because you got what you're dialing, you're sacrificing, plus the strength of your leader. That's a pretty good number most of the time, and you have an interesting spread in leader strengths from faction to faction, and that's important. And then you've got a great sort of take on rock, paper, scissors here with your weapons and defenses. And so if you get the right combination, you're like, boom, even with a weak leader and a relatively low or conservative dial, I've killed your leader and mine's alive. And so that's all I needed to win that battle. And the whole element of card knowledge and information as its own resource becomes extremely valuable in the game. And so knowing I know that they have this weapon and now I have the defense for it, so I should go take them on. But do you know if they have another weapon? And that's where the tension really gets in there. So describing advanced after you have described basic, there's definitely going to be, I think, a significant number of people who are like, "Ooh, man. Okay, I mean, you keep saying this is a great game, so I guess we'll give it a shot." And those players who do quickly pick up on it and understand it will agree, yeah, this is pretty good. It's a pretty good system. Even the advanced combat, the spice styling, is pretty good in the context of the entire game. But you have that conundrum where you're like, okay, you're new. Which faction should you play? And I think, 99 people out of 100 will say, play the Emperor since you're new. It's the easiest faction. But with spice dialing, it's the hardest faction. It really is the least elegant out of all of them. If you've got, the double strength warriors of the Fremen and they don't need spice, Fremen maybe are the easiest faction to play, but they've got so many different, especially if you're playing advanced, they have so many advantages. They've got tons of these little advantages. Oh, I do this with the storm, and I do that with the storm, and I do this in combat, and this with shipping, and this with movement. And so it's a lot. It can be just the sheer number of things that you're trying to keep track of can be overwhelming for a new player. And recently I was discussing this with a friend, and we talked about what is the best faction for a new player. And the answer is none of them. The best faction. They're all complicated in their own ways, especially if you're saying we're going to play advanced. You could say, well, maybe it's the guild, the spacing guild. They get paid for the shipping. They get half price. What could be easier about that? But then you're like, well, when's the best time to take your turn? Going last, I mean, a lot of times you do want to go last, but just saying you have the power to go last, that's not really what that advantage is all about. And understanding when you really want to go first or when you want to interrupt somebody so that they can't go, that is something that a new player is not going to pick up on, although the table can certainly give you advice. But again, if you're relying on your opponents, and most of the time everybody else is your opponent, to give you advice on when to use your abilities, it's maybe not the ideal experience. Still, You can say, well, maybe it's Atreides. They get that card knowledge. But, unless you have a nice way to track all of it and you understand what every card is and you have an understanding of what is even in the treachery deck, maybe Atreides is not the best bet. And it could say, well, maybe it's Harkonnen, but like if it's holding 8 cards, something that you want a new player to do? Are they going to be lulled into thinking, oh, I've got 4 traitors, I should just go get into battles all the time? That is probably not going to work for them. So that's a discussion. Again, we could go into that later on. Here, James here was looking for advice. He's been watching MCDM play Dune, and it seems like they are playing advanced, but they're not using the spice styling. They don't do it. And then, we get another discussion about, possible buffs for the Fremen. All Fremen survive the storm. Allow the Fremen to draw 2 storm cards and pick the one they prefer. At the end of the shipping and movement, Fremen collect spice in locations where there are no opponents. That certainly might work. What else do we add? I don't like advanced combat. I don't really get into why. I feel you, Andy. So one, forget it. Ignore the issue. Play without it. And just sure, Fremen don't get any benefits. Oh, well. This is the easiest. Yeah, but again, it really nerfs the Fremen. Worship of the Maker. At the end of the movement, Fremen can collect spice in locations where no opponents. We've seen that before. Desert Power. They just adjust their dial +1 or -1 after combats have been revealed. Yeah, maybe. It's not much of a buff. They press learn, reduce the spice cost of all Fremen bids on treachery cards by 1 spice. So they have to win, but you have to get into, do they need to have that 1 spice and then they just get to save it maybe, or they get a rebate? That could work too, but is that enough? They have to go get that spice, and in order to get the spice, at times they have to fight for the spice, so that might not really do it. So this is just kind of a sampling, and this is just on Board Game Geek. If we read through the comments on the Gale Force 9 Game Found, about every 10th comment, somebody is talking about, just get rid of spice dialing. They may phrase it in a different way, fix the combat. So it's a little bit divisive. And I think, there's a lot of players over the years. And once you get to that point where you do understand it, you tend to use it all the time. Because again, you want the whole package. You want the double spice blows and you want the advanced advantages. It's really about the advanced advantages. I think that's what's most interesting. Because those advantages are very thematic and they really enrich the game experience overall, in my opinion. It can be a bit much at first learning the game if you're like, I've got all these different advantages, keeping track of when to use them. I know that when I play, I do try to be a little bit of a referee. I am constantly reminding people, don't forget you can do this right now. And they, and they look down at their faction sheet and they say, oh, that's right, I can do that. And I go, I'm reminding you this, even though it is not in my best interest for you to do it. I just know that a more experienced player would never forget to do it. So I'm not going to take it. I do not take advantage of new players in that way. I do try to intimidate them. Absolutely. I'll be like, don't go to that spice blow. I will absolutely destroy you. I'll not only kill your leader, I'll capture another one of your leaders. And I do like to play Harkonnen a lot, although I will play Tleilaxu as well. And Moritani getting to be a favorite. So I guess I like the bad guys a lot. Those are my 3 favorite factions, give or take. And so I will use it, but I'm also teaching them that is part of the game, that whole social element of bluffing and intimidating and coordinating and ganging up on somebody, et cetera, et cetera. That, I think, is what makes Dune such a fantastic game and highly thematic game. I will end this with a funny little story. I can't resist, but I was looking at the rankings, not of game, but of thematics. There's a interesting thing when you go to Dune. You've got, its rank overall. It's, it's out of the top 200, which is, that is too bad. But, the Cult of the New, it's just a thing. And this, did better than the classic Dune. And I think this is a better version overall, so that makes sense. But because it was newer. But hey, you know what? We're in the top 50 here for thematic games. And so that's pretty good. And, they on strategy games, it did all right. But the one thing, when you're looking at what do people consider more thematic than Dune? And then you'll have some things where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, Star Wars Outer Rim, it's pretty thematic. It's also, it's nice that it's a more recent game. It's the same year, according to this, as Dune, as this version of Dune anyway. But the one that makes me laugh the most, and we just look at how high up it is on here, that's what really makes me laugh is Sky Team. Now, I like Sky Team. This is a fun 2-player game. Everyone is playing both of you are playing a pilot, and you're trying to land a plane, but you are not allowed to really talk. Can't really communicate too much. So, yeah, it's exactly like trying to fly and land a plane. It's actually almost completely not has anything to do with what it's like to fly and land a plane. It is maybe the least thematic game on this whole list. So that just makes me laugh. And certainly if you want to debate me about that, feel free, but you're going to be objectively wrong. Anyway, that is a little bit where we're going to end this video, but feel free to weigh in on, whether or not you like spice dialing and advanced combat, but not so much like I like it. But, I'm more interested in hearing what your process was like in going from basic to advanced. Did you go straight in? How was that like learning? If you did learn basic and that basic combat, how did it compare learning the advanced version of it, and what did it make you think of it? And how do you feel about it in terms of thematic and elegance? What other alternatives that we haven't really touched on here have you used, and how successful has that been? Have you just given a lot of buffs to the Fremen, and what were those buffs? Did you come up with a different system? Are you using the double strength leaders? Do you have something else? Always curious to hear about that sort of stuff in the comments. And I look forward to that. So there you have it. Thanks everyone for watching this video. I hope to see you again soon.